I never thought a regular Saturday dinner at my parents' house would mark the beginning of such a dramatic change in our family's life. But there I was, sitting at the familiar oak dining table, when my older sister dropped the bombshell that would set everything in motion. "I'd decided to sell my apartment," Amanda announced, barely containing her excitement. "We're going to open our own Italian restaurant." I nearly choked on my mashed potatoes. The apartment she was talking about wasn't just any property, it was a luxury 3-bedroom condo in the heart of the city, the one our grandmother had left her in her will. Her husband Mike nodded enthusiastically, his fork waving in the air as he spoke. "I know everything there is to know about Italian cuisine. And Amanda has restaurant experience, so we're perfectly qualified." I watched as my parents' faces lit up with admiration. Mom clasped her hands together in delight, while Dad beamed with pride. "That's such a wonderful idea, honey," Mom exclaimed. "You've always had such a good head for business." But something didn't sit right with me. Call me boring, and trust me, I've been called worse, but being a financial manager means I can't help but think about the practical side of things. "Have you actually calculated all the risks?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Maybe it would be better to take out a business loan instead of selling your only property?" Amanda rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. Classic Nellie, always overthinking everything. Do you at least have a business plan?" I pressed on, glancing at her kids, 5-year-old Tommy and 2-year-old Lisa, who were playing with their toys in the living room. "You have 2 small children to think about. If things don't work out, buying another apartment won't be easy." "Oh, please," Amanda scoffed. "You don't understand anything about business opportunities. In today's economy, you have to take risks to get ahead. You can't just sit around waiting for success to fall into your lap." "But your restaurant experience," I started, remembering how she'd only worked as an administrator for a few months before Tommy was born. "It was pretty brief, wasn't it?" "God, you're so boring." Amanda threw her hands up in exasperation. "This is exactly why you're still single, Nellie. You never take any chances." I sat there, pushing the remains of my dinner around my plate, listening to them spin their fantasy of success. Not once did they mention the possibility of failure, of things going wrong. Not once did they consider what would happen if their dream restaurant didn't work out. An hour later, I pulled into the driveway of my small house, Grand's house really, though she'd been gone for 3 years now. As I unlocked the front door, my mind wandered back to her final days and how she'd divided her property between my sister and me. Amanda had practically camped out at Grand's hospital bed, going on and on about how perfect the luxury apartment would be for her future family. I remember Gran looking at me apologetically as she explained her decision to leave me the house instead. "You've always been practical, just like me," she'd said, squeezing my hand with what little strength she had left. "This house isn't fancy, but it's paid for and full of love. You'll appreciate its value more than anyone else could." Sitting in my cozy living room now, surrounded by Gran's old furniture that I couldn't bear to replace, I couldn't help but think about how history kept repeating itself with Amanda. The memory of her childhood tantrums came flooding back, the time she screamed for 2 hours straight because Mom bought her the wrong color bicycle, or when she threw herself on the floor of the mall because Dad wouldn't buy her a second pair of designer jeans. There was also that memorable Christmas when she refused to speak to anyone for 3 days because she got the previous year's iPhone model instead of the latest one. Our parents had nod along to whatever scheme she cooked up, praising her creativity and ambition while dismissing my concerns as negativity. Even when she dropped out of college because classes were boring and she wanted to find herself, they supported her decision wholeheartedly. I made myself a cup of tea in Gran's old porcelain cup, trying to push these thoughts aside. I had my own life to focus on, my job at Henderson Financial was demanding but rewarding, and I had a major project presentation coming up that could lead to a promotion. Our team was working on restructuring a client's investment portfolio, and I needed to be sharp. Amanda's restaurant dreams weren't my problem, and dwelling on them wouldn't change anything. But exactly 1 month later, my phone rang during my lunch break, just as I was reviewing the final numbers for my presentation. Mom's name flashed on the screen, and I felt a strange sense of foreboding. Nellie, you won't believe it, she practically squealed, her voice high with excitement. They did it. They sold the apartment and found the perfect location for the restaurant. It's right on Madison Street, you know, where all those trendy places are. Mike is already working on the menu. He's got such wonderful ideas, fusion Italian cuisine, can you imagine? And Amanda, oh, you should see her Instagram posts about the restaurant. She's going to be such a successful businesswoman. She's already got over 1,000 followers for the restaurant page. I gripped my phone tighter, feeling my knuckles turn white. Where are they living now? They found a nice rental, Mom replied breezily, as if they hadn't just sold their only real estate asset. I'm watching Tommy and Lisa while they get everything set up. It's so exciting. They're talking about having a big grand opening party next month. I stared at the financial report on my desk, thinking about the massive risk my sister had just taken. The statistics about restaurant failures in their first year flashed through my mind. I'd looked them up after that dinner, and they weren't pretty. 2 months passed in a blur of work deadlines and quiet evenings at home before I received Amanda's message. The invitation popped up on my Instagram feed, an elaborate digital card with gold lettering announcing the grand opening of Bella Italia. I had to admit, it looked professional. When I arrived at the address on Madison Street that Saturday evening, I was actually impressed. The storefront had been transformed with elegant lighting and window boxes full of fresh herbs. Inside, the decor was warm and inviting, exposed brick walls, dark wood tables, and strings of twinkling lights crisscrossing the ceiling. Nellie, you came. Amanda rushed over in a designer dress that probably cost more than a month's worth of rent. She air-kissed my cheeks, champagne glass wobbling in her hand. The place was packed with familiar faces, cousins, aunts, uncles, old family friends, and Mike's entire extended family. Mom and Dad were holding court near the bar, Dad's voice carrying across the room as he gestured enthusiastically. Just wait and see, I overheard him telling Uncle Jim. Amanda's going to be the next big name in the restaurant business. She's got that entrepreneurial spirit, you know? Not like Nellie, she'll probably work for other people until she retires. Mom nodded along. Some people are just born leaders, and others, well, they're more comfortable following. I pretended not to hear them as I made my way to the appetizer table. Their words didn't sting as much as they might have once. I'd long ago accepted that I'd never be the daughter they bragged about at family gatherings. Congratulations, I told Amanda sincerely, raising my glass. The place looks beautiful. I hope it's a huge success. The next few months fell into a pattern. Every Sunday dinner at our parents' house became a progress report on Bella Italia. Amanda would sweep in, sometimes with the kids and Mike, sometimes just with Tommy and Lisa in tow, and dominate the conversation with tales of her budding restaurant empire. That's our girl, Dad would beam. Always knew she had it in her to be a successful entrepreneur. It's in her blood. Mom would inevitably chime in with, not everyone has that drive, shooting meaningful glances my way. Amanda would smirk at me across the table, that same superior look she'd had since we were kids, and she'd gotten her way yet again. But one evening, when the conversation turned to actual numbers, I couldn't help myself. How's the revenue looking? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Are you hitting your projected targets? Amanda's smile faltered for a split second. Oh, you know how it is with new restaurants, she said, waving her hand dismissively. We're still building our customer base. But we'll be self-sufficient any day now, and then the profits will really start rolling in. Something in her voice made me think of a time in high school when she'd insisted everything was fine with her grades, right up until she failed 3 classes. But I kept that thought to myself and just nodded, taking another bite of Mom's pot roast. The spring evening started like any other Sunday dinner, with Mom's cooking filling the house with familiar aromas and Dad telling his same old jokes. Then Amanda cleared her throat and grabbed Mike's hand. We have some news, she announced, beaming. I'm pregnant. Baby number 3 is on the way. Mom burst into tears of joy, Dad started talking about another grandchild to spoil, and Mike sat there grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Tommy and Lisa jumped around the table, chanting, "Baby, baby." I set down my fork, choosing my words carefully. "Are you sure this is the best timing? With the restaurant still getting established and everything?" The room went silent. "You'd think I'd just suggested selling Tommy and Lisa to the circus." "Nellie," Mom's voice could have cut glass. "How dare you? A baby is always a blessing." Besides, she added with that particular tone she reserved for discussing my personal life, "You'd understand if you had any children of your own. Or a husband. You're 30 now, you know. Not getting any younger." 8 months later, little Emily joined the family. She was beautiful, with Amanda's blue eyes and Mike's dark hair. But while everyone was cooing over the new addition, I couldn't help but notice the strain showing around my sister's eyes, the way Mike kept checking his phone with an increasingly worried expression. The truth finally came out 3 months after Emily's birth, during another family dinner. Amanda looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes visible despite her makeup, while Mike had traded his usual confident swagger for nervous fidgeting. "We're having some challenges at the restaurant," Amanda admitted, pushing her food around her plate. The word seemed to physically pain her. "The staff turnover is killing us. We've gone through 6 different head chefs because Mike keeps wanting to innovate with the menu." She took a shaky breath. "We've had to take out a business loan just to keep things running. The numbers they're not what we projected." I sat there in silence, remembering all my questions about their business plan from that first dinner. The loan they should have taken instead of selling the apartment. The risks I'd warned them about. But I didn't say any of it. The next 6 months were like watching a slow-motion car crash. Every week brought new problems at Bella Italia. First, the lunch crowd dwindled to nothing. Then the evening reservations started to dry up. The restaurant's Instagram page, once full of beautifully plated dishes and smiling customers, went quiet. The last post was a sad 2-for-1 Tuesday promotion that got 3 likes. I heard most of it through Mom's daily phone calls to update me on the situation. How they had to let go of half the staff. How they started closing on Mondays to cut costs. How Mike got into a shouting match with their last remaining chef over putting sushi rolls on their Italian menu. "They're just having a rough patch," Mom would insist. "Every new business goes through this." But it wasn't just a rough patch. By spring, the writing was on the wall in bright, neon letters. The restaurant's debts had piled up like autumn leaves: unpaid suppliers, late rent, mounting tax bills. The final blow came when their main investor pulled out, leaving them with no choice but to sell Bella Italia for a fraction of what they'd invested. The sale barely covered their business debts. They still owed the bank nearly $200,000 from the loan they'd taken out. Amanda, Mike, and their 3 kids, Tommy now 8, Lisa 5, and little Emily just turning 1, were left with nothing. No home, no income, and a mountain of debt. I almost skipped the next Saturday dinner. Something in Mom's voice when she called to remind me about it set off warning bells. But I went anyway, pulling up to their house just as the spring sun was setting. The atmosphere hit me the moment I walked in. Mom and Dad sat ramrod straight in their usual chairs. Amanda and Mike were there too, the kids playing quietly in the corner, unusually subdued for them. Emily was asleep in her carrier, while Tommy and Lisa seemed to sense the tension in the room, focusing intently on their tablets. I hadn't even settled properly into my chair when Dad cleared his throat. "Nellie, we've made a decision." The way he said "we" made my stomach clench. "Your sister and her family need a place to stay," Mom jumped in. "You have that big house all to yourself." I felt like I'd walked into an ambush. "What?" "We need to move in with you," Amanda stated, as if she was telling me the weather forecast. "Temporarily, of course." My mouth went dry. How long is temporarily?" Amanda shrugged, examining her perfectly manicured nails, probably her last professional manicure for a while, I thought hysterically. "Hard to say. I can't work, obviously. Not with 3 small children to take care of. And Mike needs time to find the right position. I'm not going to flip burgers somewhere, Mike interjected, puffing up his chest. I was a business owner. I need something at an executive level. So we'll need to stay with you for a few years, Amanda continued, as if discussing borrowing a cup of sugar. It's not like you're using all that space anyway. And let's be honest, Nellie, you're not getting any younger. The chances of you getting married and having kids are getting pretty slim. You're already 30, and you spend all your time working. I sat there, stunned into silence by my sister's breathtaking arrogance. The casual cruelty of her words hung in the air like poison, made worse by our parents' nodding heads. Mom and Dad were actually agreeing with her, as if my single status and career somehow made me responsible for fixing their mistakes. I pushed my chair back and stood up, the leg scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that made everyone jump. No. What do you mean, no? Amanda asked, genuine confusion in her voice. The concept of me refusing her anything was apparently foreign to her. I mean no. You're not moving into my house. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. Not for a few years, not for a few months, not at all. The silence that followed was deafening. I could actually hear the tick of Mom's ancient kitchen clock, marking the seconds. Tommy and Lisa looked up from their tablets, sensing the tension in the room. Even baby Emily stirred in her carrier. Then the explosion came. How dare you? Mom shrieked, her face turning red. They're your family. Your own flesh and blood. You selfish, heartless witch. Amanda joined in, tears already starting to flow. My children will be homeless because of you. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. I never thought I raised such a cruel, uncaring daughter. These are your nephews and niece we're talking about. You've always been jealous of your sister, Mike added, wrapping an arm around my sobbing sister. You're probably happy we failed. I let them rant, watching as they worked themselves into a righteous fury. The accusations flew thick and fast. I was heartless, cruel, selfish, bitter, jealous. A terrible aunt. A disappointment as a daughter. A failure as a woman. When they finally ran out of steam, I spoke, my voice still perfectly calm. You know who could take them in? You could, Mom and Dad. Since you supported their brilliant business plan so enthusiastically. Since you cheered them on when they sold their only home. Since you told them what a wonderful idea it all was. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Dad started to sputter something about their house being too small, but I cut him off. I warned you all, I continued, reaching for my coat. I warned you about selling the apartment. I warned you about starting a business without a proper plan. I warned you about the risks. Not one of you listened. Not one of you even considered that I might know what I was talking about. And now that everything I predicted has come true, you expect me to clean up your mess? I buttoned my coat with steady hands. You made your decisions. All of you. You chose not to listen to reason. You chose to ignore every warning sign. You chose to risk everything on a dream with no foundation. And now you're facing the consequences of those choices. I walked out into the cool evening air, closing the door on their protests. As I got into my car, I could still hear them shouting through the windows, their voices a chorus of outrage and disbelief. The harassment started within hours of me leaving my parents' house. First came the guilt trip texts from Mom, how can you sleep at night knowing your nieces and nephew might end up homeless? Then Dad's angry voicemails about family duty and responsibility. Amanda alternated between tearful pleas and vicious attacks, while Mike sent long, rambling messages about how I was destroying his children's future. I blocked their numbers after the first week, but they just switched to email. Then social media. Then they started having other family members contact me. Aunt Susan called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Cousin Rachel sent me a 5-paragraph Facebook message about how karma would get me. Uncle Jim cornered me outside my office to lecture me about family values. I weathered it all, focusing on my work and the peace of my home. But I wasn't naive. I knew my family well enough to know they wouldn't just accept my refusal. That's why I'd called a locksmith the very next day after that disastrous dinner. The locks were changed, a security system was installed, and cameras were placed at strategic points around the house. Smart thinking, as it turned out. I was driving home from work one Wednesday evening when I saw them. Amanda, Mike, and the kids were camped out on my front porch, surrounded by suitcases and boxes. Tommy was sitting on a large duffel bag, looking bored. Lisa was crying, and Emily was fussy in her carrier. Mike was jiggling my doorknob with what I assumed was my mother's spare key. I pulled into my driveway and got out of my car, unable to suppress a laugh at the scene before me. They all turned at the sound. "Something funny?" Mike snarled, still trying to force the key into the lock. "Actually, yes," I replied, leaning against my car. "Did you really think I wouldn't change the locks after that dinner? The alarm system's nice too. It's already sent 3 notifications to my phone about attempted entry." Amanda stepped forward, her face twisted with anger. "You can't just leave us out here. We're your family." "You're trespassing," I corrected her. "And if you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police." I pulled out my phone to demonstrate I wasn't bluffing. "You wouldn't dare," Mike growled, taking a threatening step toward me. I held up my phone, showing them the 911 already dialed, my thumb hovering over the call button. "Try me." They stared at me for a long moment, probably searching for any sign of weakness or uncertainty. They found none. Finally, Amanda burst into tears, real ones this time, not her usual performance, and started gathering up their things. Mike helped her, muttering threats under his breath. The kids just looked confused and tired. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I spent the day visiting rental properties in decent neighborhoods, finally finding a clean, spacious 3-bedroom apartment in a good school district. The landlord was understandably hesitant about renting to a family with 3 young kids, but the 6 months' rent I paid in advance, nearly $20,000 from my savings, helped change his mind. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house, the apartment keys feeling heavy in my pocket. It was early, but I knew they'd all be there. They always gathered for Saturday breakfast, a tradition that used to include me too. The room fell silent when I walked in. Mom nearly dropped the pancake plate, and Dad's newspaper crinkled as his hands tightened on it. "Here," I said, placing the keys and a folder on the table. "It's a 3-bedroom apartment on Cedar Street. Good neighborhood, walking distance to the elementary school. I paid 6 months' rent in advance." Amanda stared at the keys like they might bite her. Mike didn't even look up from his phone. "The lease starts today," I continued, my voice steady. "I've already talked to the landlord. He knows you have 3 kids. There's a playground in the complex, and the building has a laundry room on each floor." I turned to Mike specifically. "You have 6 months to find a job, any job. Pride doesn't pay bills or feed children. When the lease ends, you'll need to either renew it yourselves or find another place. This is the only help I'm offering." Nobody spoke. Tommy and Lisa had stopped fighting over the syrup and were watching with wide eyes. Even Emily seemed to sense the tension, her tiny hand paused midway to her mouth with a piece of pancake. "That's it?" Amanda finally asked, her voice bitter. "You think throwing money at us makes up for turning your back on family?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The entitled teenager who always got her way had grown into an entitled adult who never learned to face consequences. "No," I replied calmly. "The money doesn't make up for anything. It's just the right thing to do. What happens next is up to you." Mom started to say something, probably another lecture about family duty, but I held up my hand. "I'm done. I helped because those kids deserve a stable home, but I'm not enabling this behavior anymore. You all made your choices. Now you have to live with them." I left without waiting for a response. As I drove home, I caught myself smiling, not because I was happy about the situation, but because for the first time in my life, I felt truly free of their expectations and manipulation. 3 months have passed since then. According to Aunt Susan, who still talks to me, albeit disapprovingly, Amanda and her family are living in the apartment I rented. Mike still hasn't found a job. Apparently, being a former restaurant owner makes him too good for regular work. Amanda spends most of her time complaining on social media about how hard her life is. Mom and Dad continue to enable them, watching the kids and bringing them groceries. I haven't spoken to any of them since that morning. I've started taking evening classes in investment management, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the emotional energy for before. Last week, I got a promotion at work, senior financial manager with my own team,